Hello everyone, my name is Tim Schroyer, and today I'm going to be going over the differences and the similarities between a poor man's covered call and also the wheel strategy. They are both similar in that you are using leverage to make profit by selling options, but they do have some things that are different about them, and especially the way you go about them are slightly different. And they both carry about the same amount of risk, though I would actually say that the poor man's covered call actually has a little bit less risk than the wheel strategy does. But that's a personal opinion. I do right now currently have both a poor man's covered call going and also a wheel strategy going, so I am familiar with both. To start it out with, the wheel is best for less volatile stocks. You don't get as much premium using less volatile stocks, but they are safer. They're not as likely to drop below your cash secured put, or if you're selling covered calls already, to not go above the what you set for your covered call, as long as you made it a safe distance out, roughly around a zero point 0.3 delta, roughly, is considered mostly safe because that gives you a 70% chance to stay out of the money. Now, that doesn't guarantee anything. Depending on news or dividends or earnings statements, it could still cause the stock to react volatility, especially if people are buying or selling it, and cause the stock price to go up or down accordingly. So basically, you would start the wheel strategy by selling a cash secured put, and whatever stock you chose, make sure it is one that you like and one that you don't mind owning. As a caveat, I am not a financial advisor. I am definitely not your financial advisor, and this is not advice on what stock to buy or not to buy. This is just for educational and entertainment purposes only. To start the wheel, like I said, you would do a cash secured put. So that means you have to have the collateral already in the brokerage account that you're using to buy 100 shares of the stock you chose. For instance, right now I have a poor man's covered call going on Riot, the blockchain stock which does mining for cryptocurrencies. Now I am doing, like I said, a poor man's covered call. Now, however, if I wanted to do a wheel strategy with this, I would need to make sure I have the capital in my account, which I currently do not, which is why I'm using the poor man's covered call to buy 100 shares if it gets assigned. But it does have a high premium because it is fairly volatile. So, for instance, if you wanted to sell a $55 strike price put on this, you would get right now, as of Saturday, March 20th, 2021, $227 for premium. So, that would basically bring your effective price down to 52.73 that you would basically be paying for the stock if it were to drop below $55 you would get assigned. And then at that point you could get the 100 shares that you bought and sell covered calls on those stock. So you could make more premium by just selling the call, and then once that does eventually get assigned, you would start all over again by selling a cash secured put. And if you need to, like if you want to keep it going longer for either the put or the call, you do have the option of either rolling out. For the case of a put, you would have to roll out and down, or in the case of a call, you'd have to roll out and up. Now, there will come a point where you have to roll so far out and so far up that you would basically have either the stock tied up or your capital tied up for a month or more, in which case it may not be worth it. It may be best to just let it go at that point and either buy it back or just let it be assigned if that's what's going to happen. And then start over on the opposite part of the wheel strategy. Now, for the poor man's covered call, I do like it as it is, at least to me, a little bit safer than the wheel strategy. For instance, when I did the poor man's cover call on Riot, I had the long call at $46 strike. And so there was a point in time about 2 weeks ago when the stock market was reacting violently to what was going on, that it went below my strike price. So neither one of my options were in the money at that point. So that basically meant I had no protection. But at the same time, I still felt confident to do some covered calls because in order for the covered call to be assigned, the stock price would have had to rise dramatically in order to put it in the money. And by putting it in the money, my long call would be put in the money too. So that would be the long call is basically your collateral or your insurance. You would start the poor man's covered call by buying a call way out in the money and far in the future. Like, depending on the amount of capital you have. For instance, one thing I like about the poor man's covered call is you don't have to have as much capital to start it as you do with the wheel. For instance, if you don't have the $5,000 or $6,000 to buy 100 shares or do the cash secured put, like poor man's covered call allows you to start using leverage for about half the cost. Now, you can't do it as much of a time frame with Riot due to its volatility, but for instance, you can go to September 17th and you can buy a $25 strike for even that's a little bit high. So in order to make it like around half the cost, you could go somewhere even as low as a $50 strike. You would pay right now $3,058 for that. But then you would also be selling a call, for instance, on March 26th. And the key thing to remember with the poor man's covered call, though, is you need to take into account how much you're paying and the difference in the strike prices. So, for instance, because I am choosing a $50 call in order to use that as leverage, but also so I can do covered calls, I need to take into account that I'm right now paying $3,060 or so. So that means I would need to make this profitable. I need to pick a strike at least 30 away from that call. So that means I would need to pick the $80 strike to sell as a cover call, which in this case I don't count as profit. It's just to initiate the trade and also lower the cost basis for your long call. I say that because you're not technically receiving any credit. Right now, you are receiving kind of a hidden credit just because it is lowering the cost of the long call, but it is not, for instance, adding to your buying power. You're not able to withdraw it or anything like that. But by doing that, I lowered the cost basis from 3,060 to 2,965, which is half the cost if you were to buy 100 shares of Riot at the current stock price of $60.70. So that lets you start doing covered calls by for half the cost of what it would normally be. And still, even from the wheel strategy, you're still saving $2,500 from selling a cash secured put in order to start the wheel strategy on the Riot stock. So that is definitely one advantage of the poor man's covered call. And like I said, it is a little bit safer, especially since I like using a little bit more volatile stocks when I do the poor man's covered call. So even though when it dropped down below my strike price of $46, I wasn't all that worried about it because I know how volatile it is. So I know that it will eventually go up and it would have to stay below my strike price all the way until June in the case of my poor man's covered call in order for me to lose money on it. And during that whole time, I will still be selling covered calls against it. So now there is a caveat to that. It is a little bit more you have to pay attention to because if, for instance, the stock price does go above your short call, you have a couple of options. You have the first option, which a lot of traders do, which is to roll out and up. And basically just to roll out the call to where it is further out of the money or just getting out of the money of where the stock is and trying to collect more credit. Now, if it's too far in the money, This isn't going to be really a best case scenario for that option because it's going to have to force you to go so far out, about a month or two, and very far out in strike price to where you're going to have your collateral and cash tied up to where you're going to have to wait a month or two before you can do anything else with that covered call. So in that case, it's not really worth it to roll out if it is deep in the money for your short call. Now you have another option if it's deep in the money, and that's simply letting it expire, which will basically be, if that's the case and it's already deep in the money, you would basically be assigned on the expiration date. So you have two options in that case. And it depends on your broker on how that would work out. But you can either do a short call if the broker allows it. That basically means because you are selling a cover call, you would be selling 100 shares at the strike price. So that means that the buyer would have to pay you, for instance, at the $80 strike price right now. If it were to climb up suddenly to $80, you get assigned, then the buyer has to pay you $80 times 100 because options become in 100 packs. So they would have to pay you $8,000. Now, if you already had some extra cash in your account and you didn't want to get rid of your long call, you could use that extra money to buy 100 shares at the current strike price, and that would basically let you do the what you have to do to where you have to sell 100 shares, but you still get to keep your long call. And that way you keep all that extrinsic value that is still there, and you can start doing more covered calls against it to make up some of that capital that you lost by doing a short call. Another option that you can do is instead of doing a short call, you could sell your long call to make up the difference. So, for instance, again, at the 80 strike price, you receive $8,000. Let's say it's risen up to 90 and you don't have an extra $1,000 to be able to afford to do the short call. So, what you could do instead is sell the long call that you made because for every dollar it goes up, it causes your long call to become worth more. So, you'll make a good amount of money if it does raise that quickly and that high. So you could use that extra money to make up that $1,000 difference, buy the 100 shares, and then you get to keep the profits that are left over. And of course, you get to keep all the premiums for the calls you've sold before then. And then you have one other option you can use if your short call is in the money, depending on your broker. Like you can again, let it be exercised, which means you have to supply 100 shares, which with a poor man's covered call you don't have right now. So what you can do is you can exercise your long call, and that will give you 100 shares that you tied up. You would have to have the capital to buy the 100 shares at the strike price that you chose. So basically, how that would work is because you received, for instance, $8,000. Say your long call is at 40. So you would use 4,000 of the 8,000 to buy 100 shares at the strike price of 40. And then that way you can do the 100 shares to the person who bought them. And you would obviously be able to keep the difference minus the premium that you paid, and also adding any premiums that you collected from doing covered calls. So those are your options as far as the poor man's covered call. If something were like that were to happen, now if your short call never gets into the money, you don't have to worry about it. You just keep either rolling out or letting it expire worthless and just do another covered call for the next week or next month, depending on the stock that you've chosen. I prefer using weeklies, but that's a personal preference. I would let you use whatever stock you choose to do this with. So those are the main differences, and different differences in how you set them up, differences in collateral, and some differences in the type of stocks that you would choose. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button down below. It greatly helps out my channel, and I hope you all have a great day and stay safe.